Okay, welcome back, everybody. Hope you had a good break. It has been an exciting year so far this year in space. Of course, we just had that great Artemis 2 panel. And as you may recall, NASA just had their ignition event at NASA headquarters, probably a couple of months ago now, where they went through their ambitious plans to return to the surface of the moon and start building the moon base over the next several years. So really exciting times. We've truly kind of entered that new golden age of space exploration, and we're going there to stay, going to the moon to stay. To talk about this, to give you more detail on these ambitious plans in a session called Building Moon Base, Enabling Mars, we have Ed Van Cise, Acting Director in Moon Base Mission and Systems Interoperability Office at NASA, and Audrey Morris-Eckart, Systems Engineer, Office of the Chief Architect. So please join us right here. Thank you.
All right, let's see. Well, thank you, Chris. It's great to be able to be here this morning, and honestly, it's been great to sit in the crowd and just watch and kind of relive all of the memories of Artemis 2 that we've been building up and getting ready for such a long time, and continuing to learn from that mission, honestly, for months and months to come. And also trying to, like Audrey was saying earlier, and in the panels, in the first panel with Dr. Dunbar and Tony, really trying to build off of all the efforts that we've been undertaking over the last several years to try to continue to push exploration further out into our solar system, and then moon to Mars for sure, but then further and further. It's really what we have our eyes set on is how far can we go, how much can we learn, and then when can we do it. And obviously we want to pick up the pace with getting on with those objectives, and the first element of that is getting our footing and learning how to go do exploration truly beyond Earth. So not just going beyond Earth, but how do we explore it, and how do we survive in it, and how do we build a presence for all sorts of different reasons. And so that's where Moonbase is really our first real attempt ever, and it's really amazing. Our program manager really said it a couple of weeks ago to us as a leadership team. We have been putting people in space to do different things for 60 plus years now, but we have never ever in humanity's existence tried to put a permanent infrastructure where humans can live on another planet ever. And that's what we're trying to do with Moonbase. And we've been talking about it we talked about Dr. Von Braun and in his objectives. We've been talking about it for a long time, and now we're getting ready to go do it. And we actually are doing it. And the way in which we're doing it is to try to move quickly, but also strategically. And so we're going to explain that a little bit to you. So first, we're going to show you a little video that you may have seen it already on YouTube and other places, but just an overview of the Moonbase.
4 brave explorers ready to ride the most powerful rocket NASA has ever launched. And liftoff! The crew of Artemis 2 now bound for the moon.
So beyond being a pretty awesome hype video, it does show a lot of the opportunities that we're trying to explore, a lot of the things that we're trying to learn, and also folding in the fact that this is not meant to be a final destination, but it's one of our first destinations for humans, and then we're looking towards Mars and then further beyond. And that's what we're really trying to emphasize with this photo as well, is trying to learn everything we possibly can about putting the human presence somewhere else in the efforts of getting us onto Mars. And so this is you've probably, between the ignition event and other media, I'm sure you've seen and heard about the different phases of Moonbase. And I'll talk about that for a little bit. But this is also, this picture that's in the background is one of my favorite pictures so far of Moonbase, because it does two things. First, it shows all the different aspects that we're going to need on the surface in order to have a human presence permanently there. And I don't know how easy it is to see on the screen, but if you look at the graphic a little more closely, you can see things like solar power towers. We need to have sources of energy. We need to have a way to survive the lunar night. So we have nuclear reactors that we're looking to put on the surface to provide continuous power even during the nighttime. We have to have a way to get around that's not just walking. So we have rovers. We want to have pressurized rovers so we can do camping expeditions further away from base for longer periods of time. We're also going to have uncrewed rovers so we can more easily and more quickly just get out and go somewhere. All of our assets that are mobile, we're looking to have both crew operated and also autonomous. So when the crew's not there, or even while they are there, they can be remotely operated, eventually operate them both from Earth and from a human presence on the surface. Obviously, we have landers. We have to be able to get to and from the moon, not only with people, but then all of the cargo and all the hardware that you see there has to obviously get to the surface. And then you see the habitats there as well. So it's one of my favorite pictures from that perspective, but on the other sense, it's a favorite one because in my area, mission and systems interoperability, we're essentially the glue, making sure that all of the pieces of Moonbase can actually work and talk together and function as a city on the moon versus just separate pieces of stuff that are doing their own thing on the moon. But one thing about this picture is that it shows you everything in one frame. And that's what we're used to seeing in sci-fi. That's what you probably are expecting. But when you start to see pictures of Moonbase in a few years, it's not going to look like this. Everything is probably going to be off in the distance. You'll have a rover in the foreground, but then the HABs are way off in the distance, or the landers. That's because the reality is that the moon, in general, is very hard it's challenging hard. It's also very hard structurally, so it's hard to dig a hole, for example, but it's a challenging place and a challenging environment. And so far, we've really only been studying the moon from a scientific perspective and a architectural big picture perspective, which is good. But now we're looking to go put assets on the surface, and we need to really understand the nitty-gritty of the geology and the geography and the lighting and the electromagnetic environment, the dust environment at the places we actually intend to go, versus saying the moon is like this. We need to say this particular ridge at this particular location has these particular aspects and things we need to accommodate for. How much, if we go to this location, how much sun will we actually get on the solar rays? How big do the towers have to be? All of those questions are the things we're trying to answer here with phase 1 and phase 2. So phase 1 is go put landers on the surface of the moon. If you've been following the lunar missions, which I'm sure you have, it's not 100% success rate of successful pinpoint landing or even 100% successful landing on the moon quite yet. And we have to get this picture to happen. We have to be successful every time we try getting to where we want to go with the assets that we're taking along. And you can only study so much, and at some point you have to go do it and try it. And that's what we're doing right now in phase 1 is with the CLIPS missions. Go put landers on the surface and make sure we can truly understand and enable capability to do that. But we're not just putting empty landers. We're taking science, mostly science, in various aspects. Exploration capabilities with rovers, some permanent scientific instruments, because we need to not only gather more scientific data about the lunar South Pole region, but then also inform our databases on what the moon is actually like. So when we go put permanent structures there, we know what we're getting into. We know what we have to design for. And that's where phase 2 comes in. Phase 2 is really infrastructure utilization, infrastructure and utilities, right? The Earth example, we need you need to at least have dirt roads. You need to have power poles. You need to have a sewage system. I mean, before you go build a subdivision, we need to have the same sort of thing on the moon before we start going and planting city type pressurized elements on the surface with humans. We're also partnering with the Artemis missions, of course, like Audrey mentioned. Artemis 4 and 5 is a great asset to what we're doing, and those are also providing moon-based capabilities as well. Let's see. And so there's another graphic, and these are all on the Moonbase website if you want to dig into them. But this just shows you the different types of capabilities we're trying to explore, even in phase 1, all the different type of assets that I mentioned. And like I mentioned, we're doing both scientific research and then also technology research. There are a lot of knowledge gaps that we have to close. And so we're being really strategic on the type of payloads and rovers that we're sending to the surface so that we can gather the data we need. And it's both on the technology front and the scientific front. Can we dig trenches on the moon? Can we bury cables? If we can bury things, we can certainly help us with protection from radiation. But our common knowledge right now is that it's a very, very thick, hard, dense crust, and so digging and trenching may not be the easiest thing, but really we'll only find out once we go and try it out. It's just one example of the technologies we're trying to get up to the moon. And I'm going to hand it over to Audrey to talk more broadly about the architecture, both at the moon and then how we're carrying this forward over to Mars.
All right, thanks, Ed. So this is a graphical representation of some of the strategic gaps that we publish within the architecture definition documents. They are the unallocated functions, the functional gaps that describe a need for new elements or systems or vehicles to achieve our objectives. They are the technology gaps that identify capabilities that we need to develop further to enable our objectives, and the data gaps or knowledge gaps that we define to indicate what we need to learn. We would do this by collecting ground truth from sensors and payloads and performing scientific and exploration research and then modeling that to better understand those environments. All of these are published within the architecture definition documents that are publicly available. These represent a demand signal that we've integrated across NASA to indicate what we're looking for. So they are a demand signal to our industry partners, to academia, to our international partners, and we have received tremendous feedback from them that they appreciate them, that they're using them, but we also use them internally at NASA to prioritize what we put on manifests for payloads and missions. So you can find these published, and I will also just point out quickly that we recently published an architecture's user's guide for Moonbase. That is the Moonbase Igniting Progress User's Guide. That it is also publicly available. This is a high-level kind of executive summary of some of the technology challenges, the capability and data knowledge gaps that we have, as well as identifying some opportunities and some Mars forward applications. So take a look at that. It is linked through the Moonbase website as well as the Moon to Mars architecture website. So I mentioned the Mars Forward considerations as part of the Moonbase User's Guide. There are a number of things that we are focusing on that are clearly indicated as Mars Forward. We are focused on nuclear technologies. SR1 will be launching soon. It is a tech demo. It will carry Skyfall payloads to Mars. This will directly affect our capability to understand the Mars environment better. Also, within Moonbase, we will build out the understanding of logistics strategies and systems development. These will be applicable to Mars missions going forward. For deep space travel, independent operations are really important. That's something that we'll continue to prove out in our missions, both Moonbase and in Artemis. Human factors are certainly something that's linked between what we're doing on the lunar surface and what we plan to do for Mars. The dust tolerance, particularly dust mitigation solutions that we develop, that's a really important technology gap that is currently hyper-focused on the moon. It's a big challenge. There are a lot of needs to fill those gaps. And some of those will apply to Mars as well. Not all of them, but some of them will. And then, of course, planetary protection is hugely important, particularly for Mars. And so I believe there's only one more chart. So this is just a link to the Moonbase User's Guide to give you a bit more high-level information if you haven't seen it yet. And then also please visit the website, nasa.gov/moonbase, where we have gathered a significant amount of information on our plans. So with that, I think we can open it up to questions. Yes.
Okay. Pretty much so many of us have flown on an airliner, commercial airline, at least several times in our lives. When that happens, we've seen the flight attendants perform the safety demonstrations aboard the aircraft. Does the space sector, intend to learn from that and airline safety and apply it to space? And if so, are there major modifications to applying airline safety to space?
Well,
And, of course, Mars and the moon.
So sure, I mean, humans are still on board and safety is paramount. So we build much of that into the design and operations.
Yeah, and I think it's a great question in the sense of the paradigm shifting that we're going to have to be doing when we really start moving into the moon base and treating it like a permanent city on the surface. And we're having people coming and going. Initially, it's not going to be the sci-fi adventures that we see immediately. We're going to get there. But initially up front, we're going to be looking at 2 crews on the surface and a cramped, tent type of setting, if you think about it in the form of camping, for a couple of weeks, very, very rough and rustic. But, very quickly, we're going to be expanding to where we'll have the permanent habitat structures. We'll be staying for, 4 crew for 30 days and continue to build on that to where we then have more like a city that you're somewhat along the lines of what we have here on Earth. But it also, the question that you bring up kind of means that we have to have a bit of a paradigm shift when we get to our permanent presence on the moon. How do we manage safety just as a day-to-day thing versus we do all of this very dedicated training for a 2-week mission and everybody's on their game all the time.
Space flight, take after the airline industry and apply it to space flight, that is.
Yeah, for sure.
Aboard spacecraft, just like flight attendants aboard aircraft, aboard planes.
Yep, I think we'll have crew members that'll be responsible for safety, just like the flight attendants do.
Aboard planes.
Absolutely. Yeah, ma'am.
Yeah, a follow-up to that question. I've been in safety and reliability pretty much all my life as a safety engineer. You write safety and hazards into the design system, pretty much the design beam. And anything like that would be written into the system if it's necessary. So probably would, it would just be a vending. I mean, that would just be.
Yeah, I
part of
was
the
like,
process, yeah.
I meant, space-wise, space missions taking after the airline industry, looking at the airline industry and saying, let's follow their example and that,
Well, it
especially
would
like,
probably be something similar to that, but it probably wouldn't be exactly like that. Unless you have passengers aboard a vehicle like ourselves that are going to that place, then yes, you would have safety instructions for the passengers aboard that ship. Yes, absolutely, there would be something like that.
I don't mean just like the safety demonstrations themselves, I mean taking it just as seriously as the airline industry does.
Well, I'm probably sure that they would, but it's written into the system.
Yes.
Yeah, so the commentary here in the room is just about the fact that a lot of safety and hazard controls are, by the nature of what we're trying to do, embedded into the design and the development and the requirements of both the individual systems, but then also the broader interoperability of the system of systems that we'll have. But there's also an aspect, just like on the space station today and everything else in the aerospace sector, when it has humans, there's going to be, as much as you try to mitigate potential for a fire, for example, depressurization, it can still happen, and so you have to be ready for that, just like on an airplane. So we'll still have fire extinguishers. We won't have life jackets on the moon,
Not to mention radiation.
but we have radiation protections, fire preventions, things that the crew is trained to do and ready to respond to. Go, Allison, go ahead.
Do you see the potential for, let's say, commercial government partnerships, and at what phase is that sort of more at phase 3 where there might be commercial or private expeditions to the moon base, or will that be happening in phase 2?
Okay, so the question is about private-public partnerships, commercial government partnerships, and the role in Moonbase. I think we can both touch on that. From you want to start with an architecture perspective?
Yeah, I would say we're starting now. We have very solid partnerships with industry and have already awarded contracts within the Moonbase program to execute the vision that we've laid out. So it's a very strong partnership. We are also broadening that to international partners and discussing their contributions to the moon base. And this is an active daily conversation that we're having.
Yeah, I think it's along the lines of the commercial crew program, but even more enmeshed, even more intertwined. The partnerships are continuing to grow. The administrator's been really focused on this, that we are embedding with the contract with the companies, providing, NASA has this wide breadth and scope of knowledge and capability and capacity and background and experience that, at least in my experience, we've been really exceptional at providing inputs when asked, or providing oversight, like providing advice of you're doing it wrong, or you could do it this way differently, but kind of as a parent to the companies. And now we're really pushing those boundaries to just embed with the companies, working as a team. They may not have an expertise, they may not have a facility, and instead of just saying, well, you're on your own, we just need to see the results, we're really working hard to work with the companies and the international partners to maybe we provide a resource, or we help them in other ways. So, and like Audrey said, we're doing it right now, and then carrying that forward. And really, I think in general, that's how we just see it being possible, especially on the moon, and then even more so going forward to Mars. Yes, sir.
With when you have the permanently manned milestone at 2032, you look at following kind of like the ISS model, where you have crews that are interchanged every months to year, and then how long before you have people that are like call it home?
So the question is about the further out crewed missions. So when do we have just a rotational scheme like the ISS does, and when do they start calling it home? I think I'll let you answer from an architecture perspective.
Yeah, I mean, it is certainly part of the objective, and the model is really the International Space Station where we've had a continuous presence. So eventually, yes, in phase 3, that is the current plan, and yes, we would trade crew out.
So the question is about the crew size. I mentioned initially a crew of 2 for short durations, growing to 4, and the question is, well, when and how do we grow beyond 4, and what does that look like?
Yeah, the crew size is really dependent on the volume in the spacecraft and the volume within the HABs that we have available. And so it will really be dependent on the assets that we're landing, and that's really the bottom line. So, right now we're held to that, and I expect that, eventually those assets will be more numerous and can accommodate additional crew on the surface.
And
Yeah, it says.
Rather than the medium populations that are required.
It's a combination. So it's really a systems problem of infrastructure. Do we have everything that we need that would support the crew? Is the habitable volume large enough for them, right? It is a multi-factor problem that is really interdependent and requires that systems view.
it's really an area where we need to learn a lot also. So the infrastructure, everything needs power, for example, just like the space station, you just have to have a power source, and survive the night is a big thing with the lunar surface. If you're in the equatorial regions, we know you get 14 days of sunlight and then 14 days of darkness, and surviving those 14 days is a real challenge. You don't have that same challenge at the poles. You have a different lighting challenge where the sun is more often visible because of at the 84 degrees, I think it is. But it's always off to the side, so the amount of lighting you get is always different, and you do have some complete night times that you have to manage based on where you stay. But the other aspect of it is we're talking about humans, and humans require certain things in order to just survive. And so space station, the amount of logistics required to support a single human on the space station is probably going to be similar to the amount of cargo, the amount of mass we're going to have to put on the surface to support a human on the surface as well. And I can't quote the numbers, I just don't remember them, but for space station, we're talking tons and tons and tons of logistics every year to support the 6 or 7 crew members that they have up there. If we want to go to 6 or 7 crew members on the surface, we're talking about probably ballpark the same amount of cargo tonnage per year. And that's independent of infrastructure and other things that we're trying to put on the surface. Landing that much cargo right now is significantly beyond our capability as a planet, which one of the things we're trying to burn that down in phase 1 and phase 2. But I think that will be a driving factor in when we can send people as well, is just being able to sustain them. And then, of course, we always have to have backup plans. So you have to have enough capability there if they have to stay longer or something happens, or if they have to come home early. It's a good, like Audrey said, it's a compounding problem.
I have another question.
Okay, last question.
Everyone talks about the aurora, like in the north and the south pole over here, aurora borealis and aurora australis. More people talk about aurora borealis than australis over Antarctica. Are there auroras borealises in
Martian science expert, so I will phone a friend if anyone.
The answer is yes, in a way. And
Okay.
the reason why is the aurora is on the day side. Instead of a magnetic field, which diverts the solar wind, squishes the tail, and produces the aurora by particles being jetted from the tail, raining on our upper atmosphere. That doesn't happen at Mars. But the solar wind comes in, there's a charge exchange process, and it goes from an electrical charge to a neutral, and it shoots right through the magnetic field and hits the atmosphere, and then you get a little light. And so,
You can't see them at night in the dark?
no, it doesn't happen on the night side. Well, I'll take one exception to that. There is a small remnant magnetic field that as it moves around, it will produce a little bit of an aurora, but that occurs in the southern hemisphere.
Because against the black backdrop of that is space, they look beautiful.
Sure, I wouldn't disagree with that.
Well said. All right, I think we're out of time. Did you? Okay.